Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling something we've all brushed up against at some point, navigating peer pressure, specifically around teenage sex. Okay, let's dive into this. To really ground the data we're going to look at today, let's imagine two 17-year-old high school juniors. We'll call them Grace and Lizzie. We're going to follow their story to see how this plays out in the real world, like literally every single day in high schools everywhere.
Are you ready when everyone else seems to be? It's a heavy question, right? And it perfectly sets up the dilemma for our first avatar, Grace. So Grace has this new boyfriend. She really likes him, but she is dealing with a massive internal conflict. Deep down, she just doesn't feel ready to have sex. But she's looking around and her entire social circle seems totally comfortable taking that step. She desperately wants to fit in with her friends. And on top of that, there's this lingering, stressful fear that if she doesn't move faster than she actually wants to, she might lose the guy. I mean, that is an incredibly heavy weight for a 17-year-old to carry.
And well, this brings us to Lizzie. Lizzie isn't exactly helping Grace's anxiety. Actually, scratch that, she's the main source of it. Lizzie is constantly boasting about having sex with her own boyfriend, Sean. But she doesn't just leave it at sharing her own stories. No, Lizzie takes it a step further. She actively teases Grace about being a virgin, pushing her to sleep with her new boyfriend, and bluntly warning her, like straight up telling her that she'll lose the boy if she doesn't take that next step. It's basically a direct, targeted campaign of peer pressure.
You can imagine, this emotional conflict is just entirely overwhelming. Put yourself in Grace's shoes for a second. You want to be accepted, right? You want to keep the person you're dating. But every single instinct in your body is screaming that you aren't ready for this level of physical intimacy. The source material points out that Grace is left feeling completely unready and just profoundly confused. She simply doesn't know how to handle the situation. By putting a human face to this, I think we can really appreciate how tough it is to navigate these social waters. This isn't just theory, it's a high-stakes, deeply emotional reality for so many teenagers.
So the crucial point is defining exactly what we're looking at here. What Lizzie is doing has a very specific name in behavioral psychology: negative peer pressure. Look, peer pressure itself is just the influence from the people we hang out with. It has a huge impact on how we grow up and make decisions. But when peers pressure us into things we explicitly do not want to do, or things that just won't end well, like Grace being pushed before she's ready, that is negative peer pressure. And it's worth noting, peer pressure isn't always the bad guy. There's positive peer pressure too, like your friends pushing you to, ace a test, avoid drugs, or even just hit the gym more. But this negative pressure around physical intimacy, it is significant and notoriously hard to resist.
All right, moving into part one, the big meta-analysis. This is where science meets social life. Let's pivot from our character-driven story over to the hard data.
Let's look at this massive number right here, 58. So a recent meta-analysis was conducted by Utrecht University, teaming up with the New York State Psychiatric Institute. And a meta-analysis means they didn't just run one study. They analyzed the results of 58 independent studies, all laser-focused on the relationship between peer pressure and teenage sexual activity. That's a ton of data. By looking at all 58 studies, researchers identified these undeniable, overarching trends about how teens influence each other sexually. Let's break down the three massive insights they uncovered.
Here's the very first key insight. Teens who have sexually active peers are significantly more likely to engage in sexual activity themselves. This tells us that a social circle essentially acts as a powerful mirror for individual actions. If everyone around you is doing something, the gravitational pull to join in is immense. So in our story, Grace isn't just fighting Lizzie's words, she's fighting the behavioral momentum of her entire peer group. It's like swimming against a massive current.
Moving to the second major insight, peer approval normalizes the behavior. The researchers found that how much peers approve of sexual encounters at their specific age heavily dictates what actually happens. See, when a social group approves of something, it inherently sends a signal to the individual that, hey, there's nothing wrong with this behavior right now. Think back to Lizzie. By talking so openly about Sean and teasing Grace, Lizzie isn't just pressuring her friend, she's establishing a social norm. She's signaling that this behavior is expected and totally normal, and that makes resisting it feel like you're breaking the rules of your own friend group.
And this brilliantly illustrates our third core insight from the meta-analysis. The greater the pressure, the higher the likelihood of giving in. It is a direct correlation. It's not just about whether the pressure is there, but the sheer volume of it. The constant, compounding amount of pressure a teenager faces can eventually just wear down their resistance. It pushes them into sexual encounters they otherwise never would have agreed to.
Let's move to part two, gender and risk perception, and see how this builds. We need to ask, does this social influence operate differently depending on whether you're a boy or a girl? Interestingly, the researchers found that, broadly speaking, peers influence both boys and girls to engage in sexual activity in remarkably similar ways. The actual mechanics of the pressure, largely the same. However, there was one absolutely critical difference in the data. Teenage girls perceive high-risk sexual behavior, like unprotected sex, way more seriously than teenage boys do. So while the pressure to actually engage is similar across the board, the calculation of the physical and long-term risks associated with it weighs much, much heavier on young women.
So, what do we do about this? That brings us to part 3, resisting peer pressure. Let's look at some actionable ways to push back against that overwhelming social current.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how incredibly practical these strategies are for teenagers who want to take back control of their decisions. First up, stay away from the source of the pressure. Honestly, sometimes physical distance is the best boundary. Second, learn to just say no. Take charge of your life and your own choices. Third, talk to a trusted adult. Share those concerns and anxiety of being pressured. You really don't have to carry that weight alone. And finally, seek out like-minded friends. Find people whose viewpoints on having sex align with yours. You change the influence by changing the circle.
To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, vital question. Who is influencing your decisions right now? Whether we're teenagers navigating new relationships or, adults navigating our careers, we are all subject to the gravitational pull of our peers. Take a moment today to look at the people around you. Are they pushing you toward the best version of yourself through positive peer pressure, or are they pushing you into spaces where you really don't belong? The most powerful thing you can do is recognize the influence and then decide for yourself if it's an influence worth following. Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.